This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
So I ask, what position is your window in? Is it all the way up? Is it down a little bit? Why does that make a difference? It really does when it's the window of transformation. How you view things, how your emotions flow, all comes down to the analogy of using the window. We talked about this last time we got together with her. We're going to pick up from that point and go a little bit deeper into when you should lower the window. I wouldn't say roll the window down, but that sounds old school because that's what we used to do. But it's still got the visual. She is somebody who brings a lot of insight on this as a licensed professional counselor with inner transformation counseling. And she's back with us, Shari Edgell. Did I say that right?
It's good. It's beautiful.
Joins us once again. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Eager to learn more about this window analogy. We started last time talking about it. Can you reset it before we continue?
Sure. So the window of tolerance has to do with how we are able to cope with any number of things, whether it be stress, whether it be trauma, all kinds of different things. So in a sort of a recap, when you look at an open window of tolerance, what's going on in the mind is that the logical brain is present and you have emotions. You're experiencing a circumstance and those emotions are real, but there's an ability to tolerate and to know what to do with those emotions. So what'll happen is you can use whatever word you want, whether that's an activating event or a trigger. What'll happen is that window gets very narrow. And so now in that narrow window, your logical mind isn't really functioning very well. And you still have emotions, but in that narrow window, that's pretty compact. And so those emotions are overwhelming.
Hmm.
And what happens in that is that you don't feel safe and you think that perfection is going to allow you to come back to a place of safety, whether that's your own perfection and I must do things perfectly, or an expectation of, let's say, a partner needs to be perfect in order for you to feel safe.
Would you say that we normally pilot with the window down quite a bit, and then the window goes up when we deal with a challenging situation, or are many of us walking around with the window all the way up or close to?
Well, I think a lot of people function like, let's take, for instance, a work example. If someone's at work, they're often in an open window of tolerance. And they've got that capacity, the logical mind's clicking in all the responsibilities of that job. But what'll happen again is there's some event that comes in that activates, maybe we talked about the 7-year-old boy on the playground last time,
Mm-hmm.
who some friend of his comes up and goes, I do not want to be your friend anymore. Get away from me. So that, of course, anything that might remind us in adulthood of an event like that is going to make us narrow that window. And we're reacting to that event like a 7-year-old, and not in a, I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean it as that little child within us is now reactivated, and that doesn't make sense to us on how we should operate in an adult body.
So I see this in a different way now. It depends on each situation. So let's say go back to that 7-year-old. That could be now an adult that is challenged by feelings of abandonment because that kid left. And maybe there was other things that presented in their childhood that quote unquote backs that up. Now, the window on that topic, if you will, relationships, holding on to them, fear of losing somebody, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That particular window, pretty up high. But it might be something else where the window's kind of down. They don't even worry about it. It's not a challenge to them. So it sounds like it's very dependent.
Right. And I think another interesting thing is One of the things I'll see in my office is people are in an open window, they're doing well, they're thinking logically, and that maybe is their work world. They go home, they get triggered or activated into this narrow window, but they don't resolve it overnight. And then they go back to work the next day and they are not all there
Hmm.
because that stuff's lingering from the pain of what's happened in the personal life.
Want to offer if you have a comment, question, maybe even want some more clarity, 631 319 6275. You can reach us or instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. So, Sherry, how do we regulate the window? how do we get, how do we, uh, how do we lower the window when we need to? And is there a time when we need to raise the window up?
Well, there's a couple of things because the goal is to recognize when you're in a narrow window, when those feelings are so big and that's all that you can see and there's a tremendous amount of pain. It's learning first to go, oh, there's that narrow window. And my logical mind's not very present. And so there's a couple of things that you can do that will open that window back up and allow you to be more logical. You'll still have feelings. It doesn't mean you're never going to be hurt or you're never going to have something upset you, but you're not overwhelmed. So we talked last time about the role of compassion, how that will open that window back up.
Hmm.
And we talked about the 7-year-old, after he's been rejected on the playground, he does not need someone chastising him, putting him down, being critical. He really needs compassion. I'm so sorry that happened to you. That really hurts, doesn't it? But I'm here for you and I want you to know I still really care. That would be a compassionate response.
How do you get that compassion with something that happened decades back potentially? And it's whether you know it or not, it's holding you back from relationships because your window's up.
Hmm. Well, it's kind of learning to kind of take a pause. A pause is one of the most powerful
Mm,
things, in my opinion, in terms of figuring out self-regulation and go on. And it's interesting because I'd like to go talk a little bit about in that narrow window some parts work stuff.
sure.
So when I first started studying parts work, which was Richard Schwartz's internal family system stuff, I'm reading it in this book and I'm thinking, okay, this is a little weird. I don't know about this. And then I had a session shortly after with someone goes, I don't know what was happening to me. I was doing this task, and all of a sudden, I had all this anxiety come up and some anger, and it did not fit the circumstance. So I thought I'd wing it. And I said to the person, well, how old did you feel when you were doing it? And immediately, 8. I felt
Really?
8. How did you know that? And so that's a part. That's just a young part that got activated. And there was a whole backstory as to why this particular adult thing ended up because it was very similar to this 7-year-old pressure that this child was feeling to do an adult job as an 8-year-old.
I give a lot of credit to that person for identifying it from childhood. Like how did they even pull that out?
You feel it. It's so weird. That was where it just broke for me. And I went, okay, this is something, and it is rare for me that a client won't be able to say, I feel 16 and this event happened to me then, or I felt
I,
it's a thing.
my mind is blown here. For me, hypnotherapy, which took me back to those times of certain ages. Um, and even outside of that, I mean, I guess I could think back, where things happen in childhood. Yeah, we all have them. Um, but might not realize whether it actually connects to now. I'm in a different place because I did hypnotherapy and learned about this a little bit more. But I don't know how that's amazing. It really is how that connects. Wow.
It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So at the same time, so that's the beauty of parts work is in that narrow window. let's say that little 7-year-old gets activated, when you can start to recognize, although that feels like all of me right now, it's just a part of me.
Right.
So then the second thing that, besides compassion, that'll open that window up is being curious with that part.
Mm.
Because you think about it, being curious is about questions, right? And so obviously you're going to use your logical mind to come up with questions that you might ask.
Well, it's funny that we're talking about being a kid with a lot of the stuff being activated from your past. And what drives most kids? Curiosity, always wondering what's going on there. So I
Mhm.
want to go back to how somebody identifies that part. And even the example of the person that you gave, how they were able to say, yeah, that's when I was 16 or whatever the age was.
Mhm.
What what is happening that allows them to access that and feel that again?
I think it's a combination of feelings. It's also in the body, like let's say you got terribly frightened, or let's go back to the 7-year-old and keep it simple. The 7-year-old is just going to have that gut-wrenching, literally gut-wrenching feeling that someone probably in front of a bunch of other friends has just said, I don't want anything to do with you.
Yeah.
And when you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of need in terms of everything that we are going to put into and put effort into in order for our needs to be met. And you got physical needs met, and then you have safety needs met, and then you get hit with that belonging need being crushed. That's going to consume us because we have to fix that. A 7-year-old cannot survive on his own. No way.
How do we fix it?
Well, let's can we play a little bit with a part that maybe
Absolutely.
a lot of us would be experienced with. So let's call in that narrow window, let's call one of the parts my inner critic. Okay, that would be the opposite of compassion.
Gotcha.
So you might start saying to that inner critic questions like when was the first time you ever remember saying such mean things to yourself?
Hmm. Does make you wonder. That's gonna for me. I'd have to think about that. Like when's the first time you remember? That one's not easy.
Mm-mm. No, but you might know it's not my current age. I've been saying it for a long, long time.
It's just a no pun intended, or maybe it's just a part of you now.
Exactly. And it's got its own language. And again, when you look at compassion being one of the things we all need, to be saying things like, you're so stupid, I can't believe I can't get over this, I'm not worthy, I'm too much, I'm not enough. All of those things will have a history to them that will definitely link back to a wound and be able to allow that person to think in terms of what I find fascinating is a parent in an adult body can now look back at the way that maybe they were treated as a child. And if typically my clients are amazing parents, and they'll go, I would never have treated my child that way in such a way to make them think that they weren't adequate. So you ask that question, you ask, what's the goal of my inner critic? What is my inner critic hopes going to happen by me putting myself down, by me telling myself over and over again these very critical things about myself?
And the very least here, when you think about the inner critic, I know it comes up for me. I know it's there, but I also know it's not me now. I
Hmm.
don't connect it to me now. And when you think of it that way, it's kind of weird that it feels like another part. If I want to go deeper and identify maybe the first time I heard it, yeah, I can think of scenarios and situations, a lot of them. But the first one, that's the more challenging. And is it important to find one of the first ones?
I would say If they can't find a first one, that does not matter, but what was an impactful time?
All right. So a standout. What stands
Right.
out for you?
Right. Yeah. And so being able to identify that is everything. And when you think about it, I also have this adult part of me that is capable of taking care of myself, that knows truth more than a 7-year-old who is subject to his environment in terms of what truth is. And it's an interesting kind of thing to be able to go, if I could imagine myself going back to my 7-year-old, and if I'm a parent or I've ever taken care of people or I have compassion, what would I say to that child in that moment? And often that's what heals those parts.
Well, maybe it's almost the same thing during hypnotherapy, just another modality.
Mhm.
I did it. Many are directed to do it by the hypnotherapist, where you confront yourself as a child and reassure them.
Yes.
Give you, the little one in you, the reassurance that, we're good. Like, I got you. Don't ever worry about it. You got me. Like, big brother's watching and taking care of you. It's all good now. It is interesting though, the inner critic, when I think back to childhood and different situations, I don't think it's just me. It's almost endless. Like, oh, there was that time. Well, remember you were doing that, and there was that. Then there was that. Then there was that. Like, I'm not even kidding. It's like I can't even add them all up. It's just as I've seen like visuals of all different things. But I guess your subconscious does add it up. It's always keeping score, looking for evidence of the inner critic, I guess.
Yeah. Right. And again, there's like a lens there, right? And that lens is in misinterpreting what we're experiencing out in the world. And that becomes our reality, even though it's not true, it's not accurate.
Oh, totally. I mean, one of them, just to get personal, I loved to draw cartoons, comic strips when I was a kid. I once became a syndicated cartoonist in my early 20s. I was already doing radio, so I pivoted in that direction because I can make money doing it. But as I look back now, I do realize that drawing was my therapy.
Mhm.
That's from my childhood. And I'm talking, age 9, 10, 11, 12, and on. But inner critic, I'm visualizing a garbage can with paper thrown every time I drew something because I could do better. I could do better. Meanwhile, if you looked at it, you'd be like, these look exactly the same. What are you worried about? It's the same. Now I realize it, but that was definitely just one scenario of the inner critic that just would help hold me back from it had to be perfect. It had to be perfect. Where
Yeah.
I unknowingly stole the fun away from it. And take 4 tries to draw something when, again, it was fine the first time.
Well, and you look at that right in the narrow window, you don't feel safe. That's what we talked about. And you think you have to be perfect to be safe. And so that's a rule that perfectionism does, is it's to keep at bay any kind of criticism. So that's exactly what's taking place in that narrow. That was what was happening to you when you're looking at that cartoon and you see some error, as it may be, that nobody else is going to see. But you're driven. The only way I can feel safe is if that is absolutely perfect.
So, are you also saying that we do these things to keep us safe from, let's say, inner critic, maybe criticism, protection? Like, am I drawing the cartoon thing? I'm going to make sure that it's perfect so nobody can say, "Hey, how come you made the car look like that?" Or that tree looks a little wonky, or whatever it might be. You're protecting yourself so that it's the best outcome. You don't need to, but you think you need to because your window's very narrow.
Yeah, and you look at, I mean, I think that's one of the other things too, in looking back at that child, is oftentimes you can identify someone who has wounded that child who could not be pleased, impossible to please. And so they're at that, just nattering at that 7-year-old and that's the adult's problem. And as an adult, we could look at another adult and go, what is your problem? But a 7-year-old? No.
Mm-mm.
7-year-old can't draw a Monet. I mean, most people can't, but couldn't, you know what I mean? And there's a childlike beauty to their capability. So to be able to look back for that individual and go, man, when I was 7, it didn't matter what I did. That person would not be pleased about anything I did. And then you can chalk it up and give assignment to that adult as opposed to some quality I have as not being good enough as a 7-year-old.
Wow. And it's so funny on the wall in the office there, I have a picture painting that my son did. He was about 7. He was about 7. Now I'm thinking about it. It's a work of art. Like just the free form expression, the shadow. If I showed it to you, not just because he's my kid, and he's not his goal isn't, art. It was just he didn't care. He just but perfect. Like just the fluid movement, everything. I think it's him in a karate outfit. Just amazing. Like I wish I did that. We have somebody checking in, instant feedback, Steve at gmail.com. This is Kelsey in Ocala, Florida. She says, when we hear our inner critic, how should we react?
Part of it is acknowledging it. This is the tricky part. You know, when you listen to the language and the pain that comes from an inner critic, we want to get mad at it. Like,
Hmm.
shut up. You need to just be quiet. But that is not how you heal the inner critic, because believe it or not, the inner critic has very good intentions. There are things it's trying to protect you from, it's trying to make you be your best. And that inner critic itself, and I know this sounds wonky, but it needs compassion too, that it has tried. You know, if inner critic stuff comes up as a 7-year-old, that 7-year-old has limited resources as to how am I going to manage this pain that keeps coming at me. So you kind of step back and you ask the inner critic these questions and be curious with it. And eventually, through it, and I've got a whole list of questions I go through in my
Wow.
sessions with my clients, but eventually you come to what other role would my inner critic like to play? And often it'll come up to be, I really want to be an encourager.
So are you saying, Shari, that when the inner critic is speaking, it's the kid inside of you, and you need to act accordingly? You can't necessarily say, shut the blank up. Are you, shut up. I
Right.
hear what you're saying as an
Yeah.
adult now. I'm an adult
Yeah.
hearing the kid critic inside, the inner critic. You need to nurture it. You can't just tell it to shut it down because imagine speaking to a 7-year-old and the kid says, "Mommy or Daddy, blah 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 blah." Blah." Shut up. You should shut up
Right.
and get out of here. You're not going to
Right.
say that.
No.
Hmm.
Well, if you're a decent, safe human being.
Well, okay, we'll just assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Yeah, so
see it different.
it takes some being able, you have to recognize that part. We're calling it today the inner critic. It can be all kinds of things like I have to be if my if things are going to get done in the house, it's going to have to be me. I have to manage it all. You'll have a controlling part. You might have
Right.
a
People pleaser part.
elitist part that just says, I'm checking out. I can't do any of it. So anyway, back to the inner critic, you notice it and that's that language of that, because what you're actually doing through the repeated languaging of the inner critic, you're actually re-traumatizing yourself.
Just by acknowledging it or acknowledging it in the wrong way,
Well, the language,
the language.
I'm so stupid, I can't get anything
Yeah, you're
right.
you're just creating more trauma for yourself. It's
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly. That's cognitive processing therapy. That's the whole beauty of that whole theory.
Wow.
So recognizing it, asking it those questions like, what's your goal? What do you hope's going to happen? What are you most afraid of? Here's another question I really love. does my inner critic come up with every personal relationship or any kind of relationship I have, or only certain ones? For instance, and I'm going to be gender biased a little bit, but let's say I have a woman in my office and she might say, I never say that to myself unless it's a significant romantic relationship. Every other relationship in my life, I never say that to myself. So then you go back to what might that wound be in terms of first love or, disappointment.
So really what this sounds like is you need to nurture, but also you need to identify and pick up on the patterns. Just what you said. The whatever part is coming up, we've been talking a lot about inner critic just as an example, but whatever's coming up, see the pattern. Oh, wait a minute. In significant romantic type relationships, that presents. I don't see it in other times. You really got to be aware, present, acknowledge. And what do we most of us do? If we even address the inner critic, we're going to tell it to go blank off. It's like
And that's not helpful. One
that's
more
not helpful.
criticism to a part of us, and again, this is all default, right? It's back here in the brain where it's,
Yes.
and bam, something happens and these things just rattle off for us. And so stepping back, taking that pause and going, okay, these are the things I find myself saying often when this happens. I can identify that's my inner critic. I want to be curious and I want to be able to bring that inner critic part into a different role in my life besides criticism.
Mm. Well, it's almost the same as when we look in the mirror every morning, and you're like, "Oh, look at that! Look, you are a mess. You got another zit over there. Look at that over there. Why are you doing that?" If you reframed it, you might say, "You're good for you look good for your age." You might flip it around, but that's coming up again, and then what are you doing? You're just telling yourself you're addressing it in a negative way. You have to nurture it. You have to nurture yourself because now I see it very clear with these parts. If you don't, all you're doing is going back to the original trauma. Where did it happen in the first place? Somebody said something, you internalize something, and that was real, even if it wasn't. But perception is the reality. It's real.
Mhm.
It's real to you as a 7-year-old.
Mhm.
Wow, interesting, super interesting today, Shari. I tell you.
I love parts work. Again, I started out going, this is a bunch of hooky, this is crazy. And then, and Janina Fisher does a really beautiful job too with parts work. Just a bit slant different than
Mm.
Richard Schwartz, but it's been very powerful.
I've never thought it was crazy, but I didn't see the depth of it, and especially the window analogy. What's actually going on here? And again, disclaimer, side note, we're not talking about multiple personalities. These are the different parts of our one personality. Yes, we have them. They're all there. Trick is
Mhm.
finding them. We're finding you to help us find them. And how do we do that?
One of the best ways is one of my email addresses, itc.shari.edgell@gmail.com.
And starts with a conversation, maybe just to call it a consultation, just to figure this out if it's a right fit.
Yeah, yeah. I don't do counseling over email, so that I wouldn't be able to be open to. But if they want more resources, like let's say you live in an area that's pretty metropolitan, you can find a very specifically trained Richard Schwartz inner uh, the family dynamic that I'm talking about. Now I just lost the words. You can look up who does IFS, who does internal family systems training, and find someone who's talking about what I'm talking about, probably a little bit different than how I work with it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's fantastic stuff to blend in with a lot of other things.
I've heard of it, but never really knew exactly what it is. And now I got it. And for that, I thank you. Thank you so much for being here today.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.